you ever heard a strange noise in your house and just brushed it off? A creak in the floorboards, a whisper of wind through the eaves. Well, for the Millers who had just bought their dream home, those little noises were just the beginning of a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. It all started with a scratching sound inside the walls. They laughed it off, probably just rats, they said, setting traps and calling an exterminator. But the scratching didn't stop. In fact, it grew louder, more frantic. Then one night, as Sarah Miller lay awake, the scratching changed. It wasn't random anymore. It was rhythmic, desperate, and then she heard it, a faint, raspy whisper shaping a single word, her daughter's name, Lily. It was the moment the unease curdled into real fear. The house, so new and pristine on the outside, felt old and sick on the inside. Every night, like clockwork, at exactly 3:15 a.m., the same patch of floral wallpaper in the upstairs hallway would begin to bulge. It was subtle at first, a gentle swell, but it grew more pronounced, expanding and contracting with a horrifying rhythm, as if something trapped just behind the plaster was desperately trying to take a breath. Millers would stand there, paralyzed, watching the wall live and breathe. Paper straining against a force they couldn't see. By morning, it was always flat again, smooth and innocent, leaving them to wonder if they had imagined the whole terrifying spectacle. Their growing terror was fueled by the family portraits lining the main staircase. They were photos of the Millers, smiling, happy, captured moments from their life before this house. But something was wrong. Every morning, the faces seemed different. A shadow under an eye here, a downturned lip there. Then the truly impossible began to happen. New faces started appearing in the background of the photos, pale and blurry figures looking out from behind their shoulders. Strangers with hollow eyes watching them from within their own captured memories. It was as if another family was slowly, silently photobombing their lives from beyond the grave. The Millers took the pictures down, but they could still feel the eyes on them from the empty spaces on the wall where the portraits used to hang. Desperate for a distraction, for any sense of normalcy, they decided to tackle a practical problem, the flickering lights in the den. They called an electrician, a gruff, no-nonsense man named L. He traced the faulty wiring to a section of wall near the fireplace. With a grunt, he took a hammer and broke through the drywall. Dust and plaster filled the air. As it settled, L reached into the cavity, his hands searching for the wires. But he pulled something else out. He held it up in the dim light. It was a small, wooden toy soldier, its paint faded and chipped. "That's weird," L muttered, turning it over in his palm. But then his eyes widened. "It's warm," he said, dropping it as if it were hot coal. The toy clattered to the floor, still radiating a faint, impossible heat, a chilling remnant of a child's grip from inside the solid wall. The strange discoveries continued to pile up, each one a piece of a puzzle they didn't want to solve. When Mark Miller decided to replace a creaky floorboard in the master bedroom, he pried it loose and peered into the space beneath. He expected to see joists and insulation. Instead, he saw a thick layer of dark, packed earth. Why was there dirt under the second-story floor? He ran his fingers through it. It was fine and gritty, but mixed in with something else, something darker and flakier. It coated his fingertips in a rusty red powder. It looked like dust, but it felt heavier. He knew with a sickening certainty that twisted his stomach what it was. Dried blood, so old it had turned to dust, mingled with the soil beneath their feet. The Millers were becoming isolated, trapped in their own home by a fear they couldn't explain. Their friends thought they were exhausted from the move, imagining things. But the neighbors knew. They wouldn't say it directly, but their whispers followed the Millers like shadows. They spoke of the original family, the ones who had the house built. They were a quiet family, kept to themselves. The neighbors never saw a moving truck, never saw them pack up their belongings. They just vanished. But on quiet nights, if you stood outside, you could sometimes hear sounds from the house. Not the sounds of a happy family, but the faint, muffled sound of crying, a sorrow that seemed to seep right through the bricks and mortar of the new home. The sounds inside the house became more frequent, more distinct. In the dead of night, when the entire world was silent, a new sound would emerge from the walls. It was a lullaby, a faint, tinny melody, the kind you'd hear from an old music box. It would drift from room to room, a ghostly tune with no discernible source. Sarah would lie in bed, frozen, listening to the gentle, haunting song meant to soothe a child to sleep. But there was no comfort in it. It was a melody of loss, a song for a ghost, played by an invisible orchestra trapped within the very structure of their home. Every time they tried to find its origin, moving from wall to wall, the music would fade, only to reappear somewhere else, always just out of reach. The entities in the walls were becoming bolder, more interactive. One evening, Sarah's sister was visiting, trying to convince her they were just stressed. There's a logical explanation for everything, she insisted. This family you're talking about, the Pattersons, it's just a local legend. The moment she said the name Patterson, a perfect, child-sized handprint materialized on the inside of the double-pane window in the living room. It wasn't condensation, it was a clear, pale print, pressed against the glass from the sealed space between the panes. It stayed for a few seconds, a silent, chilling rebuttal before slowly fading away, leaving the two sisters staring in stunned, horrified silence. The logical explanations had just run out. There was one place in the house that felt more wrong than anywhere else, the basement. A heavy oak door led down to the dark, damp space. The Millers kept it locked with a heavy deadbolt, not because they were afraid of burglars, but because they were afraid of what was already inside. Yet, the lock was useless. They would lock it, double-check it, only to find the door swung wide open hours later. It seemed to happen randomly at first, until Mark noticed a pattern. It only ever opened after someone in the house voiced the thought that was always on their minds. The moment the words "we're not alone" were spoken aloud, a low, ominous creak would echo from the hallway, and the basement door would be open, inviting them into the darkness below. The Millers finally hired a paranormal investigation team and a local historian desperate for answers. Who was this family? What tragedy had befallen them here? The historian dug into the town's records, searching for deeds, blueprints, any mention of the Pattersons. The answer he found was far more terrifying than any ghost story. The land had been empty for 100 years before their house was built. There was no original family. There were no Pattersons. The house was brand new, built from the ground up only 5 years ago. The scratching, the voices, the faces in the photos, they weren't the echoes of a past tragedy. They were happening now. The family wasn't buried asterisk under asterisk the house. They were buried in it. Someone had built a tomb and disguised it as a home, and the Millers were living inside it with them. The screams had never stopped. They had just been waiting for someone to hear them. Thank you for watching. If this story sent a chill down your spine, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more terrifying tales. Let us know in the comments what you would do if you found yourself in a house like this. Stay safe and always check the walls.